Yes, my name is Hamdi Abdul. I am the director of African Community Housing and Development. I am I, co- I, co- I see myself, or I recognize myself as someone who is always fighting for social justice, someone who's able to see inequity from multiple angles simultaneously, someone who understands probably how to fight and fearless in her approach. I am someone who cares about the issues that matter to my community, and and when I'm saying my community, my larger community, the Black community specifically, someone who wants to close those, or play a role in closing those barriers that we might have socially as Black community, and cares about uh, the importance of leaning to each other and learning from each other, a believer of informed community, which I mean like informed from the bottom to the top. Thank you.
My name is Inye Wakoma. I am a Seattle native and a lifelong resident of the Central District. I've lived here most of my life, not my entire life, but my work, both as an artist and an organizer, and someone who has helped to create multiple community institutions, is definitely centered in my experience of being a part of this community. And so I'm a founder of Wanawari, the organization that I'm here to talk about today. Um, and Wanawari is a center for Black art, social connection, community stories, and organizing. Founded in 2019, so we're in our third year of operation, and our work leverages art to create the conditions that support Black homeownership retention, um, both by creating community capacity to address issues of land use policy, but also creating the kind of robust community infrastructures that help folks create solutions that can be activated on the ground.
Yes, my name is Anthony Peterson, and I'm the executive director of OIC of Washington. And I'm a product of Tacoma and Lakewood, Washington. However, I've lived in Central Washington for the last 15 years, respectively in Yakima County. I have a passion and desire to lead BIPOC community programs and serve individuals of all ages. I have a background in organizational leadership, development, and grant writing and grant development. The organization I currently lead is OIC of Washington again, which is one of 100, or what it was founded as the 100th OIC in America back in 1971. We are led by the great Reverend Leon Sullivan, who recognized the shortcomings and limited opportunities for Black people in America and wanted to create systems to train and promote the hiring of Black people in America. And through his and under his Sullivan principles, we continue operating training and workforce development programs here in Washington State, as well as providing other service programs, all intended to eliminate the conditions and the causes of poverty.
So I believe the report cites the both the retention and the expansion of Black homeownership as one of the uh, core community priorities, and that really sits well with the work that we do at Wanawari. Um, uh, as I mentioned in my introduction, we do function on a daily basis as an arts and community center. Uh, However, our work is really wrapped around the idea that art can be a frontline tool to address very critical social and economic challenges. And so, as an institution, we operate in a black-owned home, and we established the organization Wanawari to prevent the sale of this particular home and the loss of it to the black community. And in doing so, we were able to raise enough money to pay the family market rate rent for a house that they did not have the immediate um, resources to fix up in order to rent it on the open market and get that kind of revenue coming in. And so, there's a similar challenge that a lot of black homeowners, particularly in Seattle, face, where you're in a marketplace where you may be land rich in terms of the valuation of your property, as it relates to how it performs in the market if you were to sell it. But that doesn't always equate to the kind of material or asset wealth in terms of the resources that you have to hold and to sort of leverage the asset as actual functional wealth. And so um, really understanding that that's a point of vulnerability for Black homeowners. Our work is really about generating a space where community can come together and start to think creatively about, how to create solutions that Black homeowners can deploy to create more ownership stability. And so our organization represents one model for that, in the sense that the family has committed to having the home and at least one other home in their family be used for cultural space. Um, so transforming these particular properties into community spaces, community cultural spaces that also serve as points of economic opportunity. So we're talking about economic opportunity for Black artists, Black cultural workers, those people that work with artists in various capacities, and Black businesses. A host of folks that we interact with as vendors, from grounds and maintenance folks and tradespeople to caterers and chefs, who service us at our events, to professionals who help us, on the back end with a lot of our administrative and development needs. And so, there's but the sort of the gateway for all of that opportunity is the robust community and cultural activity that we do. And so recognizing that that is an important need here in Seattle, and it's a clear space where resources can flow in because people get the value by experiencing the work that happens at Wanawari. And so, that's a very specific model that we deployed to achieve one thing, which was to save one house. But in doing so, we realized that um, as an organization, we had to learn a lot about land use policy and interacting with the city of Seattle around issues of zoning and building codes and so on and so forth. And in doing so, we really got to the point of really understanding what the barriers would be for other Black homeowners who might want to do something either similar or would also be thinking about very different but nonetheless innovative ways of repurposing their properties and the challenges that they would definitely face. And so that has definitely led us into the community organizing work, where we are bringing together Black homeowners and Black cultural workers to engage with public policy as it is, to become experts and then begin to reimagine how those policies can be shaped to so that they actually support the goals that community has for staying anchored in Seattle. And so, so there's, I think, I probably touched on a couple of other priorities that were identified in the report, about economic opportunity. So there's a lot that's really wound up in the work that we do, and we try to really approach it um, both creatively, but in a way that's very seamless, way that feels natural and leans into community priorities and expertise. Because most of the work at Wanawari um, it really is driven by community engagement.
Well, I first want to thank you, Annie. I see many commonalities in the approaches that we are taking. And I mentioned multiple times in my life, we are members of the learning community, and we are continuously learning from a diverse community in King County. And we hope to always hope to do our best to move the needle for our community and make sure that through the information that we receive, we do something about the future of our children, the future of our elders, the future of our futures as well. And through that lens, we African Community Housing and Development has been established by community members who have a vision and really a mission that is engaging the community as well as uh, working with the community and with the systems through the information that we always receive. And if I look into you know, the factors that are in front of us, which is community mobility, my priority and my dream are mostly about uh, the business community, which I really feel that when the business community is strong, then wealthy generation and home ownership is evident that we will have an opportunity where people think big and move towards that. Right now, the way we evaluate our work is based on what are the basic needs first. So we use our left hand to tackle basic needs of the community, which is how do you create a thriving community when the community is hungry? How do you create a thriving community when the community is not healthy, when there is no education? And when we're talking about education, how do you avoid what, the system is called education, but more move towards like quality education? How do you ask for support for receiving a quality education for your children? Because that is very important. Also, how do you understand about the environment that you live, whether the environment socially or scientifically? How do you connect with those who care about you more? And how do you strategize your moves in those systems when you know that there will be always barriers and obstacles to pass or cross? So I wanna share why community business and why housing development or housing support or the need of shelter for those of us who do not have. As you may know or may not know, or maybe I should share, uh, it is important that I look back to my experience when I came to this uh, region, which includes like during Katrina, what I have seen, a lot of young Black men at their prime life or prime time, and becoming jobless and fleeing from New Orleans and that area. In the area where I lived that time, when I saw that they are jobless and it's 11 o'clock in the day or 12 o'clock in the day, the first question that hit my head was like, why? And I have a scientific background, but I ask questions why, and I seek answers. And if I don't find the right answer, then that's an area of work for me. Or how to think bigger and work with those, even among those who have barriers or stigma or something that is prohibiting from receiving the job that they need to receive. How you help situations like that through experiences from the outside world, because I traveled a lot in my life. I've learned that people who try hard or can change the course or the trajectory for their, young people. So through that experience, I've learned that there are possible ways that we don't have to all work for the wealthy. We don't have to all work for specific groups or corporates that we know. We can have our own businesses and generate our own income through what we like as we wish. And the important thing is, in this case, how do you educate the community that they can do that? The steps that my organization has taken included like opening a farmers market in the Delridge area, where so many small businesses that work in the food area come to us and sell their products, while my organization is supporting and sometimes subsidizing if there is a food or vegetables or something that is left that needs to be consumed. Doing that has also, we don't stop in one spot, but we think again. We thought that it's important that we think, how do we communicate with this group of people and make sure that they can have a voice? So we ask them, what is it that you like most that we can help you with? And generally they said that they need to have their own space to sell their products in Seattle. We thought that was a brilliant idea, because one way to go back to Seattle after the gentrification is to really, go back to having businesses, because the money and wealth is in Seattle. Most in the South, there is no. So how can we have a space? Can everybody have a space where they can sell their products? So African Community Housing and Development has received support from City of Seattle to create a hub for the community, which we call Immigrant and Refugee Community Market, where they can sell their products and own those spaces themselves in the future. But to from one idea, we are trying to move to the next, so that people are able to create wealth, are able to also have increase their purchasing power and buy homes. But you cannot just own a home if you don't have the right job, or if you don't have the right work that can generate that income that you need to buy a home. I mean, one of my experiences that I also want to share with you all is how can we go to housing development? We consider ourselves as have-nots, people who don't have that wealth to create to build homes for themselves. The African Community Housing and Development is now working with a program that it's already kind of ready to be launched as soon as possible, but have row houses where we can allow our community to buy or rent as depending upon their affordability, especially those who have very low income, below the 60 AMI. African Community Housing and Development is tackling those processes, those problems, getting support from all the connection, all the possible connections. One thing that I want to highlight is sometimes you need to fundraise, but you don't have the right connections to do that fundraising. We are again going back to learn from the experience of those who have done similar work, and make sure that we don't go long or we shorten the timeline for ourselves because we want to learn from those who have done before us. I will say thank you.
Yeah, so just to build off of what you both talked about, I think those elements are real important, as well as really shifting the narrative and really changing the mindset, or helping establish a growth mindset for many of the communities we serve. Um, Really, we talk about education, really helping, our Black community, and for me specifically, BIPOC communities, being that I live in Yakima, and our Black population is really really small, but substantial in need. But really transitioning the non-cognitive skills that have been developed through situations of maybe pain, stress, um, adverse childhood experiences, but then also looking at the other half of those things that comes perseverance, overcoming challenges to really build self-efficacy, and helping work through the causes and conditions of poverty. In the work that we do a lot of hard skills training work. We do a lot of um, resource development and resource distribution. But what we try to do first is, provide some counseling, or some navigational support to our clients and participants, so that they can not only receive and use the resource, but it's the resource is more of a catalyst point to help them um, go from, you know, stable to thriving, or get from extreme poverty to stable to thriving. And that only comes through really shifting the narrative and changing, a mindset. That's one area where we're really trying to really focus on. We make sure that our, clients in this community in general understand that their life challenges and experiences were significant, but they must be used to help them um, move forward, and we can apply the skills that they use to overcome them into the workplace or in other opportunities. And when some barriers to economic mobility, or barriers to maybe getting the job they want, or other challenges come forward, we have to reinforce these skills that were developed, in the perseverance that they've that help them overcome other challenges in their lives. So really shifting the thoughts of being a, you know having a poverty mindset into having a thriving mindset. And then also with shifting the narrative, we have to understand that there is enough room for everyone to be successful. There is enough space for there to be, you know, um, more than one person that looks like us in the room. Too often, you know, it's we have this tokenism mindset, um, and we must provide mentorship opportunities for those who desire to start their own businesses. We must provide mentorship opportunities for those who are in an entry level position that desire to be a CEO someday. Um, and having the mindset that we want to sustain these positions, so that there's more people in the workplace that look like us, so that there's systems that can be developed, and policies can be changed to remove barriers to um, upward mobility, and that will help create funding opportunities and salary increases. Once you have people of color in leadership positions who can really assess policies and systemic racism and bias and HR policies. Um, so there's a huge need for mentoring in the workplace, and recruiting folks that look like us in the workplace. And that all first starts with the shift of a mindset shift, for our existing leaders to then, you know um, to go into, our communities and provide these opportunities. And that's what we try to do at OIC of Washington. We provide a lot of, like I mentioned, we provide a lot of hard skills training development, but we also try to focus on the mindset, socio emotional skills development, because that's how, from there, that's how we'll make sustainable change and systematic changes in our community, instead of just being a resource provider, or being transformational instead of transactional. So, and to both of your points again, as I close, once we change the mindsets and shift the narrative, um, we are then going to be able to have the income levels to purchase homes, to sustain homes, to grow homes, to, have multi-family properties that become income generating. That now we're making. Now we have assets. Now we're changing generations, for years to come. So I think equally important to home ownership and um, business opportunities, whether micro enterprise or entrepreneurship opportunities, is really having that mindset shift and changing the narrative.
I I really agree that the changing the narrative is really very important, because as someone who was not born in United States of America, I see that most of the time we follow the mainstream ways. We don't. It's hard to say, like, I don't do your way, I do my way. I want to do my way, and it's going to be like, if you want to impact health, it has to be a way that is not yours. If you want to impact education, it has to be a way that is not yours, because you are also following, you seem to be following the money, but you want to follow, like, what do you want to do and how do you help your community, but at the same time you have to follow the fundraise ways. So all these things are a struggle all the way. And and yeah, how do we change the narrative and say, like, no, I can do better by doing it my way, not your way. Your way is not working for me. Or you have to continue, like, becoming that obedient, yes sir, yes ma'am person, and get that little money, which is doing something that is not your way. One example that I want to give is, if we want to impact health, community health, especially, and homelessness as well, then what does a homeless person need? They need a care, but what kind of care? Is that your type of care or my type of care? Like, do I need to take them to go to see the forest, for example? And one may wonder, why does that? Why do you have to take them to the forest? No, I want them to see the forest because their life was here in this small tent, and in the city, and not having option is to see other places as well. So that might seem odd if I write that on a grant application. Who knows, that might be like, what are you talking about? So that cultural competency of people who are doing the work is very critical in moving and changing the narrative. So I truly agree with you that there will be a time soon that we're going to bring our narratives and our ways to work for us to tackle all these issues that we have.
Yeah, that's interesting because I'm still really resonating off of the things that Anthony and Hamdi um, just really highlighted. Anthony talked about changing the mindset and really finding a way to lift up folks' um, sense of agency, just sense of agency in their own lives, right? And I think a lot of times, the narratives that we're saturated in, particularly I would say as Black people, are designed to disempower us psychologically, right? To keep us sort of in a box, and then there are ways that those processes then become self reinforcing, right? And so the work that we do at Wanawari, really, is about narratives, and some of it is about changing the narrative, but also some of it is about reinforcing the narratives that we know have worked for our people across generations, right? Not letting go of the things that have brought us this far, lifting those things up, understanding that we're operating, in a new century, in a new social setting, a new technological, economic reality, um, and a new social and political reality. That we're each one of us has the opportunity at a moment's notice to be operating on a global scale in the nature of the work that we're doing, and that shifts the equation of possibility significantly for any one of us, right? And so then um, there's also the opportunity, as we're working with one another, to encourage tapping into the best of who we are, right? And so our work at Wanawari really is about, imagination. It's about possibility. Um, the notion that for our artists could come together and help a family save a property using art was an act of radical imagination, and it's part thinking that we could then take the what we do on a daily basis, having open art exhibits and live performances with artists and everything, and really communicate to the community. This is an opportunity for us to figure out how to anchor other Black homeowners, how to stem the tide that's been ongoing for the past 25, 30 years. So we're talking about almost two and a half, three generations of attrition of Black people from the Central District in Seattle, due to what, when we're talking about narratives, uh, due to what most people felt was a fait accompli, right? That there was nothing that we could really do effectively, individually and collectively, to hold on to the land that became so valuable to folks in the mainstream. And so our work is anchored in this place of possibility, this place of dreaming. But the work that we do, we rely on some very old school values, right? A lot of the values of community building and collective work and responsibility. I could actually talk about the work that we do at Wanawari in the framework of the Nguzu Saba, which are the foundational principles of Kwanzaa, but are actually borrowed from key Swahili words, and so then refer to sort of the social organizing value systems that are common in many societies across the African continent. But those are also values systems that were common in Black communities of the South, right? That were then translated to Black communities as Black folks migrated to the northern cities and to the cities of the West. And so when we think about the values that created the Central District in the first place as a Black community, we're talking about the transmission of values across generations, across landscapes, across political realities, to create something new in Seattle, right? Of course, facing you know um, all of the same social, economic, and political barriers that Black folks were facing everywhere else, You know, the ultimate consequence was gentrification and displacement. You know, if I were, to not, sort of draw out the history in too much detail, but also looking and saying, okay, well, the same values, the same ideas, the same sense of possibility that we saw our parents and our grandparents and our great grandparents employ to create something that was intrinsically valuable for us, to create the thing that nurtured us, that we were germinated in as human beings. Those are the same values that we can use to create something for our grandchildren and for our great grandchildren here in this space, right here, without having to feel like we have to be forced to move yet again to find a sense of possibility someplace else. So, I think, that shifting of the mindset that Anthony's talking about, that sense of expansiveness. When I hear Hamdi talk about, getting, making, opportunities for folks who are houseless in the city to be able to experience the wilderness as an expansive uh, uh, sort of aspect of their experience. And what can that do for the spirit? What can that do for the mind? How can that help re-energize and rejuvenate, and anchor them back in their wholeness again? I think all of these are ideas that are essential to one, how we think about our work at Wanawari. But I feel like it really is, our essential to the way that most folks who are doing work in BIPOC communities really think about um, uh, our connection to the issues, right? Which are intrinsically connected to uh, our families and our communities. And so yeah, I think I'll pass the baton there.
I just want to hit on your comment about values, and that really ties to the dream I have. Is, you know, I really want folks to be able to be their whole self in their workplace, where you don't feel like you have to turn on this face or adapt to the general understanding of professionalism, within reason, being respectful and all those the basic norms, but really present who you really are, the value systems that you have created within your individual culture, and let that transcend and shine in the work that you do, um, in meetings and so on. Hitting on the points of a system that was established for people that don't look like us. I mean, my whole professional life, I had to develop habits and recondition myself to fit in within a certain system so I can be less threatening, or I can be, approachable, and I got to temper my passion, because it may be come out as aggression. So my dream would be to just come to work, utilize the skills that I've developed, my intellect, but also be me, speaking the language that I want to speak in,
Mhm.
honor the values of, not just, I want to honor the values that I learned from the old head in the hood, you know what I mean, who taught me, life through parables, and I want to be able to speak those freely. you know, um, that is one of the dreams for me, and just for people to come and be them, and specifically Black people at a workplace, so you don't got to get home and take off one image and put on another. Um, but so
So I think it is very important to dream if you are a leader. You are dreaming, but at the same time, you want to see your dream at least either activated or starting or happening. So definitely I dream, and my dream is to see a Black community that is working together collectively We don't, I personally, I don't like to enforce relationships, but to create opportunities where the Black community can come together, learn from each other, support each other, as well as make things happen together. Have a voice that respects the elders, have a voice that caters to the young, to the sick, to the vulnerable, to the ill, and also a voice that um speaks economic development and what it means to the community, and have its own timeline that we can make accountable those who are supposed to do part of this job, because it's not our job to advocate for ourselves all the time. Definitely we will highlight, but we are looking to have our elected officials be responsible of advocating for us and making things happen for us. That is their job. Actually, my job is to talk about the needs, but their job is also to come to where the community is and have that conversation that they are informed. So I think collaboration in the sense that we are all responsible and everybody is responsible of their work, and everybody has to be accountable for what they claim that they are responsible for continuously. I think that's my dream. I don't have much to add, but I think I will stop it there. Thank you.
In my experience, especially being in Central Washington, and getting to learn other cultures, and I noticed that there is a there's always it's I think it's rooted in anti blackness, but it's been acceptable for folks in other, whether it be ethnicities, races, to really convene and to have their own space, and to have just a place to really just be them unapologetically. And some of the work that we're trying to do as an agency, and really supporting our Black community, it's not a popular topic to have a space for Black folks just to convene. Or there's always a why does there need there's always a question of the need for a type of convening, specifically for black people of Africana diaspora. um and that, again, it's really rooted in anti-blackness, you know across the nation. But um I'm really trying to work to change that narrative. Like, it is okay for us, and it's healthy for us to convene and be unapologetic about convening. Everybody doesn't need to come to our events. We can do our events for us, just as the Asian Pacific Islander groups do, or our Native American brothers and sisters do, or my Latino and Latinx brothers and sisters do. It's okay for us to do the same, and that's an area where, at least in Central Washington, I'm trying to really cultivate that, again, that mindset shift, and change that narrative, that it's healthy for us to come together, and we don't need to apologize for our presence and coming together. So I'll leave it right there.
Daniel, you want to jump in there?
Sure, I'll jump in here. Um, so yeah, that's a. I mean, the question of well, what are we learning? That's such a big question, and I think that obviously I have to speak personally. I can't speak on behalf of you know um, my whole organization because I think it's such an expansive question that even to answer it feels like something that I would want to be in conversation with all the people who are involved in what we do. But I would say that over the 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 3 years that we've been working on this particular project, um, I think I um, I think that I am learning or I'm becoming aware. And I think maybe I'll try to craft the sort of the framework of learning a little bit differently. But I think I watch and I'm really becoming much more aware of the way that folks in our community are really gravitating towards um, uh, long-term systemic change that doesn't emphasize focusing on white people or white institutions, so to speak. That's always going to be a feature and function because we are dealing with institutional frameworks and institutional power dynamics. But I think you know for me, being born in 1969, and growing up throughout the 70s and the 80s, of course, the social and political resonance of the civil rights and the Black Power era, was the type of thing that defined, for us, you know, what it meant, one to sort of locate yourself as a Black person in the United States, and then sort of identify, well, what does that mean, in terms of both things very personal, in terms of, well, what do I want to do with my life, and then immediately thinking about, well, what are the barriers? What are the things that you want to do with your life? Which is a calculation that almost every Black person, has to make, and they're probably, a very elite few Black people, that are a part of a very specific economic class that probably don't face those barriers in quite the same way. But I think for most Black people that um, that calculation is something that comes in very early. And I think that they are slowly evolving, some different formulations around um, around how we think about um, uh, um, our either our response to, or how we configure, our own sets of power dynamics to create the conditions that we want to see. And so I think there is I think that there is um, uh, a shift towards thinking about, well, how do we just create the thing that we want to create, right? Um, and how do we think about how we do that together, right? I think there's a greater dialogue around healing in the Black community as a central tenet of what it means to be Black, right? Emotional healings, sort of collective, you know, um, uh, psychological healing. Thinking about ideas of post-traumatic slave syndrome, and how that's entered into the sort of the common conversation about what it means to be Black, and what we can do um, in America to make our condition better. So I think I think I'm watching the ways that um, collectively as Black people we begin to reimagine um, uh, you know um, you know how sort of how we comport our lives here in America. And I think that generally speaking, across the board, the conversation is moving in what I feel um, is a uh, much more expansive sort of framework, which to me is encouraging. Right? I don't know that I see things that offer like immediate and permanent solutions, or will result in immediate change and solutions that will be permanent. But I think that I am seeing an evolution in the way that Black people think about how we do things together, and some of it I think has to do with the learning over the past 50 years, having had a moment that where a lot of folks felt like we made such great strides. Again, going back to the 60s and some of that window during the 70s and 80s where for at least some folks of us in this country, things seem to open up. And of course, we had some structural changes to the laws that at least gave us the feeling that there was more room to maneuver. But then, of course, we also face some serious setbacks when thinking about sort of the economic reorganization of the world economy in the 1980s, which basically dismantled the manufacturing and blue collar labor force in America, which was a huge setback, also coupled with the emergence of crack in our communities, and then followed very close thereon by waves of displacement. And so those are, if you really look at the sort of the arc of the past 40 to 50 years, um, you know uh, there have been some amazing improvements and some amazing things that have set us back. And I think in this particular moment, people are sort of taking stock of a lot of that, sort of as a coherent experience, and starting to imagine some new pathways forward. So um, I don't know. I think I'm always trying to learn from that. I think I listen a lot more, in online spaces than I actually speak, because I'm really interested in how that conversation is evolving in our collective consciousness, and that's what I want to learn from, uh, as someone who is entering into the second half of my life, and so yeah.
Well, as someone who calls herself as a member of the learning community, I think I'm learning every day. I have learned a lot I think over the last 17 years that I was working with the community. I have learned a lot. I did not have any clue of what discrimination means. I did not know what racism means a lot. I came from a country where everybody is black and everybody is beautiful, and everybody, that kind of, my skin has never been an issue to anybody. So coming here and my skin and thinking that I am the most beautiful human being that God has ever created, versus discrimination, it was itself like a struggle. Like, how do I explain to those who think that they are superior to me that I am not inferior to anybody? And if I don't like to claim superiority, but I was raised that I was beautiful. I was raised that my color is what everybody is looking for. And my name and my color and everything about me had explanation, which means my mom will sing songs for me that my color looks like the sand, some kind of sand. My color looks like some kind of skin of snakes that shine in the desert. My color, had every beautiful thing that my mother could think about as dark. Even sometimes saying to me that you look like some kind of dates that are black and sweet and among the sweetest. So learning about racism, learning about being a minority in a country where some are superior to the others in their thinking, were all things that I learned, and I also learned to fight back and explain that I'm not, inferior to anybody, neither in my thinking, my mindset, my capacity, my being. Everything about me is beautiful. So that was what I've learned, that I should explain people that is not the right way to measure anything or anybody, or human capacity as well. Assumptions that created a lot about what I want and what I need and who I need to be. Somebody assumes all the time that is that's the category that I should live in. So I learned to break all barriers. I learned that my biggest leader in the social justice is Martin Luther King. He sacrificed his life, and mine is not any dearer than than his life. So I have to follow that and his steps. In fact, I was awarded King County's Medal of Service. Uh, I think in 2017 or 18 by a council member, one of the council members, Joe McDermott, who saw that, the interest in, if you want to continue your fight against social injustice, then you need a recognition. And I truly appreciate that. That was the highest possible award that somebody can get in King County, honoring Martin Luther King and those who, whether they were black or whether they were white, who sacrificed and then stood next to him and fight fight. I believe that I have to also recognize that color is not the only thing that determines who we are and our limits, or recognize those who are also standing side by side with us, but at the same time going back to who are we, how do we continuously define ourselves, our effort, our moves towards social justice. These are the things that come to my mind. How do we raise our children? Because our children are the future, and the ones who really need to advance in this difficult life. How can we have or educate our fathers to be responsive like the mothers and help them? How can we avoid situations that that create family separation? How can we invest on the family values that need to be taken care of, and that collective, how do we raise our children together? Because I think mother and father are made to help together that family. So the family connection is where development starts. Then it gets to the community. Then it gets to neighborhoods and cities and counties and state level and then national. So we gotta build our own families to thrive. That is what I have learned, and continuously thinking through piece after piece. How do I tackle issues in a way that moves the needle for all of us and in a collaborative way eventually?
Yeah, I would say that our work really is rooted in is rooted in collective power, right? Um, we started as a collective, and we are growing as a collective. A lot of times when I talk about the work that we're doing at Wanawari, um, I I try to express that um, at least 60% of what happens at Wanawari is community driven, right? And so these are things, either specific events or programs, or other things that were generated out of the community, not out of the Wanawari leadership. There are specific things, that Wanawari is doing that are led by those of us who helped found and continue to steward the organization. Um, but and those are those are sort of the anchoring touch points. Our Case 21 organizing work is work that I'm leading as the land steward at Wanawari. The art exhibits and the regular art performances uh, are led by Elizabeth Johnson, our curator, and then our Black Spatial Histories Institute is oral history or community story gathering work uh, that's led by Jill Friedberg. But within there's a whole range of other things that really are things that community has brought into the space, and so then become embodied at Wanawari. And so I think that that in that spirit of collaboration, um, that's where we rest most comfortably, right? And that's where the best ideas of you know our space, that's where they're born out of. And and that's the that's that is, I don't know that we make an effort to broadcast that per se. Like, I think it comes out in how we talk about Wanawari and all those different things. Um, but I think that when folks in our community come, they intrinsically understand the dynamic, right, and they lean into that, right, and so that's of course the type of thing that we talk about very specifically. For instance, when we talk to funders, right, and there are times when that conversation is really functional because funders ask very specific questions. Like, what is your relationship to community? How does community help lead? And these are all questions that are becoming more and more prevalent in in the ways that funders um, sort of evaluate their granting possibilities. And so so then you're called to answer those questions more and more. I think that there's still probably an intrinsic challenge in because the sometimes the fundamental nature of that relationship really hasn't transformed between folks in the community doing the work and folks who are funding it, even though some of these new questions are there. um, but I think we lift that up as the heart of what we do at Wanawari. um, and and so uh, I think there's a part of it in terms of the way that we just do the work that um, uh, we don't spend a lot of time creating like a, a theory, like a theory of practice, right? As much as we really rely on what we know works from being embodied human beings in our community. So I think I answered the question. I feel like I might have got lost in the sauce somewhere in the mix and the ideas I was exploring. But I'll pass it to Anthony and see what he has to say.
Yeah, and Inya, you bring up a good point on how it's kind of organically led by the community. And I think just in the work that we do, and not necessarily chasing grants, but chasing services, um, in a lot of ways, we rely heavily on the either secondary data sources that we get from, whatever federal state database,
Mhm.
um, or some soft surveys that we may implement for the community. um, but I think as an organization, we can be more intentional about having more, not necessarily um, structured community forums, but just having the community really inform the implementation and development of some of the service initiatives that we build. I think that's really important, and we as an organization, I think, have some work to do in that regard. But then I also have, especially working with private donors or corporate donors, I think it's imperative for them to come to these communities and take part in some of these learning sessions, so that they are not just a transactional funding arm, but they are a part of the transformation that we're trying to have as a community, as well as um, just in the systems in which all of us operate in. Because by having them at the table and having them participate, they can take that into their individual communities, and they can then start breaking down some of the systemic barriers that rest in their agencies or foundations, and really make that transformational and collaborative change. So I just want to applaud you for just building that space and for the community to gravitate to you in that regard. And as far as our organization, we know the collaboration is needed, but I think we've been too caught up in trying to tailor to what the grant requires instead of implementing the or integrating the grant or funding opportunity into the community that we're trying to build.
Mhm.
So with that, I'll pass it to Hamdi.
Well, thank you so much. I would say like collaboration from looking collaboration from multiple angles. And I would say that I would rather a little bit highlight about what are the factors that prohibit collaboration, and what I see as a solution for the lack of collaboration, or the existing collaboration. So collaboration is mostly something that is it should not be enforced. Like you have to collaborate with John Doe. I don't think that's right, but it comes through connections, community connections, space, meeting, time, understanding each other, falling in love with each other, that you can work with together, and also leadership. Do we have the right leadership? Do we have the right processes, guidelines that can keep that collaboration thrive as well? So if those factors are nurtured, then collaboration can happen. But the way that, do you collaborate with, how many collaborations you have, I think that is a silly question. When even grants, they ask those questions, you know uh, then my answer should be like, I collaborate with this and with that, and enlist that. But that doesn't have to give me points, because that should not be enforced. That should not be pushed to. Give space people to learn from each other, fall in love together, say we can work together. We have the same passion. We have, the same issue. I like to solve it this way. You like to solve it that way. Maybe we can do that, and that is better. Something that makes sense to me is what I'm looking for. And actually enforcing that people should listen, that we can thrive. There are things that we can do alone and better than collaboration also. I need to highlight that. Sometimes if you don't have if you're not collaborating, that does not mean that you failed. That's why I'm against like grading that part, if anybody is grading that. Uh, I also want to add that together we can thrive. Definitely, that's the definition that I would need to underline. But let us come together, let us find together, let us decide together, and let us not listen to those who dictate to us. I think that is an area where I need more strength and more collaboration. Like sometimes when we need to, say no, then we say no together. And say yes, we want to say yes together. There are decisions that need that. I think I would end that, and I appreciate
Yeah.
your listening ears. Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to, before we move on, I just want to uh, acknowledge and thank you for introducing the language of love into this conversation, particularly in this. I think people use words like collaboration and collective power. All the buzzwords, right? Which represent real things. But just to listen to you say, well, we need time to meet each other, to know each other, to fall in love. And that, I think that idea, on an organizational level of falling in love, falling in love with the mission or the way that somebody else is doing their mission, the way that they move, that's inspiring to you, that draws you to them naturally, right? That you sometimes you just want to be around it just to see what's going on with it. Maybe something will come out of it in terms of actually, working to create something together, or maybe not, you know. But I think that if we're, thinking about, how do we move, how do we move like sort of big structures forward, like thinking about philanthropy, right, and funding and all that. I think really inserting more humane language into how we talk about it on a regular basis um, is important because that's it. I mean, Bloom, one of our major community driven projects, really is born out of an act of love. The person who started, you know, um, was like, I love being at Wanawari. I love being here. This place is a balm for me, and um, and that was inspiring for that person to want to pour, one of their best ideas of the moment into the space and help it come to life. And that's not anything that could have been manufactured. So